this is Kimberlea, and Yoga Snack is our bite-sized podcast where Robbie and I serve up nourishing discussions on yoga, astrology, nourishment, and mindset.
We mix wisdom with personal experiences to serve up quick, insightful conversations that nourish your practice and add flavor to your daily life.
Ready for a quick bite of wisdom? Let's dig in. Welcome to episode 2 of Yoga Snack. I'm Kimberlea.
I'm Robbie.
And we're going to talk today about resistance, mental resistance. I just got done teaching a class, and we got into some pretty interesting territory yoga posture wise. And what I started off with was, first I informed everyone we were going to some weird places today, which is not uncommon if you take yoga practice from me. And the resistance of our mind is generally more indicative of our capacity to move our bodies into weird shapes, right? That's sort of a just a nutshell. But the yoga postures are puzzles, and being able to open our minds is just as important as opening our bodies. And that tension and resistance actually lives in and through our body. So today, what I want to talk about is mental resistance, and where does it live in your body, and how does it show up regularly, and what do we do about it? We can have like these positive affirmations, like I am smart, I am strong, I am capable. But when we don't actually believe them, they're not helpful. And yoga is an 8-part system. And this is something I come back to again and again and again. And the pop culture of yoga has led us to believe that yoga is a physical practice. And when you look at yoga as a system or a technology, there's 8 branches to this system. And only one of them, the asana practice, which is what most of us know yoga as, I put in air quotes when I did that, is only 1/8 is concerned with the body. And the other 7 limbs of yoga is very much concerned with morals and ethics and this inner world of subtle alignment, which actually has mostly to do with training the mind. And I feel like part of my responsibility at this phase in my life is to really help educate people around the fact that yoga is not a physical practice. It's actually a lifestyle, and it has more to do with your mind than it does your body. But of course, we have to take care of our body, like our body's included in that, right? And the resistance that we build in the mind also shows up in the body. And that's why we have to work with them both in this sort of symbiotic relationship of being able to work inside of the tension and the anxiety, and learning how to work that out of us so that our mind can begin to open around possibility. Robbie did my class today too, and we did like this weird pose. And I say weird because I don't like advanced. I don't like that terminology. They're just puzzles. And I'm curious as we got into the second side, because what I do is like I get people and I kind of like sneak attack a little bit. Like I prepare the body. We spend a very short time on this sort of weird pose. And I'm always interested to see that in between sides, that sometimes, most oftentimes, after I sort of unpack that mental component, it changes, your experience changes. So did you, like from side to side, did you have a different experience?
Oh yeah, it was like you get into it the first side and it's like, okay, what? There's a little bit of that, like this is unlike anything I've done.
Yeah.
And by the second side, you've sort of eased some of that mental stress, and you start to realize, okay, this isn't that crazy.
Yeah.
We can, and just like some of the cues that you give to where you're just like, you shift one thing, over, and it just makes it a little bit more accessible. just like that in itself starts to ease. It's like, okay, well, I think I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think curiosity is so much more important than ambition. And that's one of the ways that I try to move through the world now, which was not how I initially began. I feel like that very like success, like goal oriented, performance oriented, even um, is so much more rewarded and even coached inside of people, whether it's business or even relationships or creativity, athletics, all of that. Like it's all performance driven. And what happens then is we aren't curious anymore. We're just driven to succeed. And life is so much broader than that. And to be able to cultivate curiosity around, like, well, what is possible and not attach our value to whether or not we can do something, but to can we learn about ourselves in this process? And that's where I think the physical practice of yoga, if you're studying asana, and that's what that can do, is it can start to help us get really curious about, well, what can I do? And I'm much more concerned at this phase in my life about what I can do versus what I can't do. And if we're wound up about like, well, what I can't do, somebody saw the posture and they were just like, oh yeah, that's not for me. But we decide so much ahead of time what we can and can't do, what we will and we won't do. And that is resistance, right? That mental resistance that puts up these barricades. And maybe you're right. Maybe you can't do that yet, but maybe you can do more than you thought.
Right.
And I think that's really valuable. I shared a story about one of my chair yoga. I teach chair yoga, and it's one of my favorite classes. And years ago, um, I had this one lady come for a while, and before we would do anything, and it was just like a forward fold in the chair or a side bend, she'd be like, "Oh yeah, right." How does that feel like when you're like, "Oh yeah, right," and then it like kind of resonates out into the whole classroom, and that resistance is so palpable. And what happens then is it closes us off to possibility. And anymore, I think being able to stay open to possibility is a key factor in the survival of humanity. Like I really truly feel like we have to stay open. We have to stop closing off to each other and deciding ahead of time, even what the conversation is going to be. Like, that's one of my new things. Now I'm like, instead of sitting there trying to have conversations in my head about what is this conversation going to be about, I'm just like, why don't you shut up for a second, Kim? Why don't you just wait and see what comes? Because as it comes, whether it's something I'm sort of anxious about or I'm looking forward to, it's like we really limit what's possible, because life is way more creative than our reductive mind can foster, as far as what's real and what can happen. So I think that limiting factor of the mind has to be addressed, and the yoga practice does train that. And so I don't know, where's the first time that you started to pay attention to like resistance, not just physically? It shows up in our physical body too, but mentally, like, where did you first like recognize, like, holy shit, I'm limiting myself?
Ooh, first time.
Or a time, that kind of registers.
The first, okay, maybe what I will say is like teacher training, inversions and things like that, where it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to do this. And it's just that like, your mind creates these stories
Decide ahead of
from
time.
from your lived experience. And then you, that might not be your current story. your mind is telling you things that's happened in the past. It's not necessarily in the present. So maybe that was the past story where, okay, I can't do crow pose.
Mhm.
But if you tell yourself that, you're limiting your present experience instead of being curious, like you said, and allowing the moment to unfold
Yeah.
how it's going to unfold.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the students today in class, the second side, after I kind of gave a little lecture in between around resistance, like, oh, yeah, right, is because she asked a clarification on the pose. And it was kind of that, oh, right moment, she's like, oh, yeah, right.
Mm.
And she wasn't nearly that snotty, but, to see it in ourselves and to even be able to play it out in front of other people and to catch ourselves limiting ourselves in the moment, because the second side, she was actually able to get into one, because maybe she clarified it, but also it's like talking ourselves out of what we've already decided. And it doesn't mean we can't be decisive and make choices and decisions in our life. So that's where it gets tricky. And that's why we have to train the mind, is that it becomes a skill where, of course, we have to use some of the past events and conditioning to move forward in our lives. And to make decisions and choices and even to keep ourselves safe, right? But there are so many things that we are deciding ahead of time that probably are sabotaging us being able to, whether it's create or connect or even experience our body. One of the like hard stops that I had in my body one time was we had gone whitewater rafting, and I'd never done that before. And this is I was practicing yoga for just a couple years. I probably wasn't even teaching it, but they stopped partway through whitewater rafting, and they're like, you can climb up to this top of this thing, this rock, and you can jump off, and it's deep enough, and it's all great, and there's like some kids on the boat, and they ran out, and I was like, yes, I'm so excited, I'm doing this. And I got on this, I ran up and I went to go like jump off the ledge. And it was like I hit a wall. It felt like a true wall that my body would not leap off of that. And I like stopped. It paused me for a sec. My body was like, no. And I thought my mind was like, yes, but it was like this hard stop. Like it felt real. And I like 2 times, and I backed up again, and I was going to run off, and it was like, hit the wall. It felt like the Wile E. Coyote, like it just ran into an anvil or something. And I sat there with myself, and this is so early on. I don't know that I had probably the same inner dialogue that I have now with myself, but I'm just like, you can do this. What's going on? It's fine. It's safe, but I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like on the surface, I was telling myself, like, you can do this. Everybody else did it. Those kids did it. Why don't you go and do it? And so when I like finally believed something different, I was able to like literally take this leap. And that's, I think, such a metaphor in life, because there's so many things that we will sit and convince ourselves that we cannot do, we will not do, we don't have the resources, I'm not smart enough, I don't know enough people, I'm not talented enough, I'm not X, Y, and Z. And that internal dialogue creates this resistance, and it creates a pathway that we're acting from. And so I know I'm using like the physical practice of yoga today, but it's like, what are we saying to ourselves constantly? What is that inner dialogue that has convinced you that you can or can't do or will or won't do? And it's a liar. It's a fucking liar. Pardon my French. But it's unhelpful. And that, what I also notice is that inner resistance, that like mental resistance, also creates tension in the body, right? That hardening off, and that like tension of like life's coming after me, and I don't have what it takes to do this. Like, I'm not smart enough. I can't do it. And I think that's something that we have to practice not doing anymore, because it's just what we do. It's like, it's this, I don't know if it's a gift of being human. What's the opposite of a gift? I don't want to say curse, but it is, there's in yoga philosophy, there's all this stuff that it just comes with being human. We're like, oh, we're just this limited thing. And it's like, how do you accept your limitations, but stay open to possibility?
The answer.
That's our contemplation today. How do you stay open to possibility? And what is a practice that you could do, right, that would change the way that you're allowing yourself to move through the world? Because it literally is a practice of allowing instead of closing off and deciding that this is the only way to do it. I'm sure, like, I always want to go back to the food world, I'm sure there's only one way to bake bread. I'm sure there's only one way to, and like, these are the steps and this is what's done, and all that's valuable and helpful. But also, isn't there this whole creative process that we're missing out on if we're just going to decide that this is the only way that we do things? Like, you brought me I'm always talking about, Robbie brought me a loaf of bread today. He brought me a chocolate loaf. I've never had this, and I'm so excited to dive into it tonight. And it's like, my mind is opening, my palate is opening now too. And it's like, there's more to be experienced inside of these rules and these laws of, like, let's collect ourselves and become more skillful. And you get to open up and be unlimited as far as creating and expressing yourself inside of this very limited human experience. So
as we're talking, the Matrix movie is popping into my head. There's like this scene where Keanu Reeves' character, the last test he has to pass is the jump test. So he's basically on top of this building,
okay,
and he has to jump off of this building and believe that he's not going to fall. And that's kind of like that mindset. Like, he knows in his head that that's not, from his past lived experiences, this isn't going to work out. But the world and the present moment he's living in, it can work out. And he's got to, like, convince his mind of that.
Yeah. Because our minds are limited, and life and the creative pulse of life, whatever you want to call it, or however you believe it to come into manifestation, is so much more interesting in the way it expresses itself, that there may be some predictability, like, you do this and you get that. In fact, we understand the word karma, right? I think a lot of people misunderstand the word karma, and they think there's some kind of karma police walking around, like, dishing out karma citations, like, you did bad things will happen to you. But life is actually, at least in the philosophy that I study, life is actually a little bit more interesting and different in that. Like, yes, karma exists. My teacher would say, it's this cause and effect thing. And there are some things that feel mostly certain. Like, you're not going to strike a match. Like, what's going to happen when you strike a match? What's going to happen, Robbie?
You're going to flame.
You're going to get a flame, right? I'm not going to strike a match and wombats fly out of it, right? Like there's karma right there. Look, there it is. But not everything is based on this law of certainty. There's a principle called lila, 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 and it literally means play. That this life has this unexpectedness around it. And it doesn't always work in your favor. Like, sometimes you do, like, you're a really great person and you're trying really hard and you're doing all the right things, and things really still are hard, or something difficult happens. And sometimes you show up and you're unprepared, and you should not be the one who gets chosen for something, and you do, like, you get the lucky. And lila is this uncertainty principle. And karma acts like, people think like karma, the world functions just inside of this karmic realm. And I don't subscribe to that belief. I feel like, yes, karma exists and it matters and it's true sometimes. But life wouldn't happen if it was just karmic. Like, there is sort of this chaotic principle that sort of swirls around and keeps things moving. And there's even, it's like when you're born, the universe is like, tag, you're it. And it's this game that we're playing, and I like that visualization instead of like showing up, doing the right thing, getting it right all the time. But it's like, can you learn to play the game and stay curious in the process? And when you play, like real play, there's not an outcome. It's not performance based, right? Like there's a joy underneath it and an undertone. And I think what happens, is that we get inside of this place of so much conditioning and so much resistance, and we're told, and then we take on beliefs about what it is that we can and can't do, and what we should and shouldn't do, that it limits us, and we take that on. And so to be able to step outside of that and to have practices and places that we can come, and even like stories and metaphor, that it helps us break out of that limited conditioning so that we can actually explore what it actually means to be like Kimberly Smart or Robbie, like what is that full expression of you inside of this limited form? What does that actually look like? Yeah. So I think maybe what I want listeners to take away today is where does the resistance live in your body? Do you know where is that? Like when you know that like you're like putting up that electric fence to life, where is that in your body?
I feel like right in the center of the chest. I feel like it's the heart. Like you just close off to everything.
Yeah.
Or at least I do.
Yeah. I think we all have it differently.
It's just like a little bit of tightness that happens when like I'm not ready to experience all that there is being offered.
So even like in class today, it was like there, you're like,
can I even do this?
Yeah, you're even holding your chest. Yeah, no, I love that. You're like, oh, me? Who, me?
Right.
I think mine lives in my jaw and my mouth. Like there's like this hardening that happens, and it generally is like this furrowing of the forehead. And it's just like this, like, why is it, like that resistance is there. And of course, then it like accumulates my neck and all of that. But I think too, I did so much work when I first began yoga to start to unclench here in my jaw, because that resistance was so true. And a lot of it was like speaking my truth, saying what I need to say, and softening and allowing here, because the resistance shows up in the body. So I guess maybe to, wrap up this episode, I want to ask you guys, like, where does resistance live in your body? And when you feel that resistance in your body, can you start to soften and question it lovingly, like with a sense of curiosity, and maybe even examine this week out of curiosity instead of ambition? Like how's this week going to go? I wonder what it's going to look like by next week. Because gosh, sometimes it's like 2 minutes later and your life changes, or 1 week to the next, there really is a shift. So one, where is it in your body, friends? I'd love to know. And two, can you approach this week with curiosity? So anything else you have for that, Robbie?
I think just feeling that, like where does that live, and how does it feel when you start to soften it? It's a great place to examine.
All right. I want to hear you guys. Please like, share, and let us know what you want to learn more about. Right at first, our conversations are just going to be sort of organic, and we want to share with you lots of stuff. Today was one of the pillars, which is yoga lifestyle and philosophy, and we're going to keep adding to this podcast. So thank you all for listening, and we'll sign off for now. All right. Thanks for joining us for this episode. And next week, you're going to want to stay tuned so you know exactly what chocolate chips have to do with energy management. Our nourishment episode will be a delight because guess what?
I've got a chocolate chip cookie recipe that I can't wait to share with you.
See you next time.